Okay, so Star versus the Forces of Evil it's a strange beast to me. Mainly because when the show first aired, I don't even remember what year it aired, maybe 2015 or like late 14, I'm not sure how old it is. But when it first aired, the first episode blew me away. I was so invested. I loved Star and Marco. I loved their dynamic. It reminded me so much of Kim Possible, which is one of my favorite cartoons ever. And I was totally on board. I was ready for this show. And basically, when it was first airing, the first couple strain of episodes, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked the character dynamic again between Star and Marco, and I thought everything was going pretty well. It seemed more like a comedy show for me, and that's kind of what I was kind of just banking on. I wasn't really expecting tons of deep overarching narrative. I was just seeing a whole bunch of fun magical adventures with Star and Marco, and I was pleased. And then the season 1 finale happened, and there were little hints, and there was one episode I think where Star was kind of like Mutapendence Day or something like that, where she had to kind of somewhat address the fact that her family and her kingdom and is totally racist towards monsters, which was an interesting turn that the show took. But that was only a taste. And then we got the season 1 finale, and totally blew my mind. I mean, usually I try not to get as hyped for finales because finales very rarely meet my expectations. I feel like I was spoiled a little bit with the shows that I grew up on, especially because I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender while it was airing, so I kind of got all of that as it was airing, super hyped, waiting tons of time for it to come out. I was super excited, and when it did come out, it kind of always met and kind of exceeded my expectations of what I was excited for. So that's kind of the generation I came off of in terms of watching weekly American cartoons, is stuff like Avatar, and which was great, and even stuff like Danny Phantom. It had good finales. It knew how to, well, except for the last one, which yeah, I might do a video on that, but I mean, I liked it ironically enough, I liked it when I was younger, but as I got older and I rewatched the show, the glaring problems came to a head. But I'm talking about Star vs. the Forces of Evil right now. But yeah, season 1 finale of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, I wasn't expecting much, to be perfectly honest, and I'm not sure if it was as good as it was simply because I didn't expect much, or if it really was that good. I think it was just that good, but we'll see how it ages, I suppose. But I really liked the season 1 finale, and it introduced a whole bunch of lore, a whole bunch of plot that I didn't think the show would have. And I was super excited for season 2. I had to wait. It felt like a pretty long time. Not like an exceedingly long time. It wasn't like the wait for like season 3 of Avatar. But it felt long. And when season 2 came out, I actually feel like the first episode of season 2 was really good. I actually liked it. I felt like that, and I keep bringing up Avatar, but I feel like the season 2 premiere of Star vs. the Forces of Evil kind of paralleled the season 2 premiere of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I might do a video about that. I probably should just kind of talk about it a little bit here. My memory of the Star vs. the Forces of Evil season 2 premiere, like in terms of like note for note, is a little fuzzy because I haven't rewatched it, but it felt very similar, because you have the Avatar episode, which is Aang is coming off of using his power, the Avatar state, kind of in the biggest way he ever has in the season 1 finale, and you have this general guy in season 2 that wants to use him as a weapon, and it's more or less Aang coming to terms with his power and kind of just addressing what happened in the previous season and realizing that, all the lore that goes on with how he should be using the Avatar state and all that fun stuff. And while Star versus the Forces of Evil is not that plot heavy in terms of this episode in particular, which I'm pretty sure is called My New Wand, it kind of hit some of the same notes. It introduced the lore, it introduced Star kind of having to come to grips with the power that she used in the previous episode. And it didn't have any general or anything like that, or anyone trying to use her for a weapon, though that would be a very interesting plot point if that did show up later. I would love to see that. I don't think it will happen. But, and just in terms of just how it handled itself and how it got me hyped that this is going to be a reoccurring thing in this season, is Star coming to grips with her powers and learning more about it. I was hyped. I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. And then the second episode after that, Ludo in the Wild, was a nice departure from the typical episode structure and typical focusing on Star. And I think that's still one of the best episodes in the entire show, to be perfectly honest. It was great. I loved it. And so it had a really strong opening. I was super excited. And I might just go down the list of episodes. I might just do that, because what I'm going to be talking about here is how I feel like Star vs. the Force of Evil Season 2 really, 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 really dropped the bar. Or dropped the ball, I suppose. In terms of what it could have done. It had a great setup. It was coming off the heels of a really great Season 1 finale that I kind of think was too good for this show to be. Like, it was a little too good, because I don't feel like it really got back up to it until, ironically enough, the show kind of picked the ball back up in this half-season, mid-season finale of Bon Bon. What was it called? I think it's just, yeah, Bon Bon the Birthday Clown, which is the weirdest episode title for this episode, because it makes it seem like it's going to be another filler, which Season 2 is riddled with filler. And this episode title doesn't do this episode justice whatsoever, because the episode is really good. It's not as good as the Season 1 finale, but it's the closest that we've gotten to being that much hype. And I'm not as hyped for it as I was after Season 1, simply because I've kind of witnessed how they're not able to pull it off. And I hope that, I have a theory, but I'll get to that later as to why that might have happened. So yeah, after the Season 2 premiere, we have Mr. Candle Cares and Red Belt. Mr. Candle Cares was a good filler episode. It was a filler episode, but it was a good filler episode, because it developed Tom, it talked about Star, and it kind of felt like it kind of put to rest a little bit the whole Star ruling Muni thing for a little while, which is nice, because they kept bringing that up, but they weren't really doing anything new with it, so I'm kind of glad that it felt like they were kind of putting it to rest for a little bit in this episode. But in terms of a filler episode, which I don't mind filler, it just has to be good filler. It has to be filler that has a point of existing, because not every single episode can be plot, especially with the fact that usually the creators don't, or creator in this aspect, never controls how many episodes she gets for a show. She's given a number of episodes, and she has to then fill in the plot that she wants to tell in that number of episodes. It might be too many, it might be too little, but it usually is not the exact amount. And that kind of goes into my theory, which again I'll get into later, as to why Season 2 ended up the way it did. Red Belt, in my opinion, which came after Mr. Candle Cares, was pointless. Which most people might not agree with, because, Marco gets his red belt, but I feel like it kind of diminished the impact of Marco getting his red belt because of how he got it. It was really comedic. It didn't have any punch to it. And the episode didn't even focus that much on Marco. It was focusing more on his goofy teacher, which I don't know why he had to be goofy. I really don't. I wish the episode had just focused on Marco trying to get his red belt. It could have had, like, wacky shenanigans and whatnot. That's fine. I'm not saying that the show has to be, serious all the time, but Marco getting his red belt is something that's been built up. And I wish that it had gotten more of a justified ending than him just watching the video and getting it, along with his goofy teacher, which now has no authority because he's so wacky. Like cartoons, they have to watch out when they want to make an adult Goofy, especially when they're putting him in a position of authority over. This is Marco's teacher, and I'm pretty sure in every other appearance, he hasn't really felt goofy to me. He's felt kind of stern. He didn't really have much of a character, but he's felt very stern. And like he is actually a karate teacher. And then in this one, he's just like wacky. And I'm like, well, okay, how did that happen? I might be wrong. Maybe he does have some wacky moments that I'm just forgetting. But it felt out of nowhere and unnecessary. Star on Wheels was pointless. Fetch was probably the worst episode of the entire show for me. I hated this episode. Star versus Echo Creek was almost good. What would have saved this episode if Star was actually hallucinating the entire show, or not the entire show, the entire episode? Because I like the fact that when she hallucinates and she goes underwater and she hallucinates and it ends with like, oh, this is all in your head. I wish that had just been the entire episode of her kind of going through all these wacky, almost Alice in Wonderland type scenarios, getting her to come to terms with the fact that she needs to fess up about what she did. And it would be kind of like a mental trip, and they could have brought in some more Star insecurities that have been showing up in the show a lot. And it could have been a fun episode that way, of just kind of getting a glimpse into Star's psyche, which I'm sure is about as interesting as it sounds. You know, Star, she has a very interesting mind, so to speak. I would have loved to get a dive into that, but we didn't really get a dive into that. So this episode almost worked, but it was just shy of being good. Wand to Wand should have had more impact, but it came too late. Season 2 has a major problem of having these long stretches of filler episodes, and then it gets back to the plot, but at that point I don't care, or I've forgotten, because the only thing before Wand to Wand was My New Wand, which was episodes and episodes ago, at this point weeks and weeks ago of airing, and I'm all like, oh yeah, there's a plot. Let's get back to that for one episode, and then it goes right back to filler. You know, Starstruck. Well, what was Starstruck even about? I don't know. Starstruck. Oh, that was about the Sailor Moon ripoff. That was pointless. It kind of seemed like it was setting up for something that might be talked about later, but it hasn't shown up yet, and it felt pointless. Camping Trip was a good character development episode, so I would classify that as good filler, because it was good filler. Usually just develops characters very well. Because sometimes the plot isn't always tailored towards succinct character development along with the plot, which is also kind of a problem, but sometimes you can't have everything. So a good filler episode should take time to develop the characters a little bit more. That's how I feel like a filler episode isn't pointless. It's not wasting my time, as if, hey, I feel like a character grew in this episode. So Camping Trip was a good filler. Star City and On the Job, good episodes. Again, another problem with season 2 is that a lot of the revelations that happen in terms of finding out things about Muni happen where Star and Marco are nowhere to be seen. Star and Marco, we as the audience now know more about Muni than Star and Marco do. And then the main characters. That's a problem. So when they find out later on, because they're going to have to find out eventually, because again, they're the main characters, it's not going to feel as impactful, because we, the audience, already know. We're just waiting for them to find out. So, you know, we should be finding out things in real time along with our main characters. So keep, like, having secondary characters and side characters figure out stuff. It's not as impactful as if Star and Marco were there. So while I do like that episode because we learn things, I feel like I don't feel like I should be ahead of Star and Marco in terms of what I know about the plot. So, Goblin Dogs, pointless. By the Book. Which one was this? Yeah, we learned more about... Yeah, we learned more about things here. I would call this a plot episode. Was this the one where Star has to go through? No, I don't think it is. I'm totally talking to myself at this point, because I'm reading while I'm talking, which I probably should have read this beforehand, but I didn't. So, but my tagline is unscripted and unpolished, so that's what you're getting. Game of Flags, I would call that almost a good filler episode. It revealed something about Star's mom that I don't remember. I think it was just actually just her wings, what she looks like with her wings, and something about the fan. It was passable. It was decent. I'm not gonna say it's bad. It was just passable. I feel like it could have pushed it a little bit more if it wanted to really go the whole family route, but it was decent. Girls' Day Out. This was it was important because it solidified Star and Jana's relationship. I just felt like they needed a better episode for that, or they could have weaved it into the plot. Like that's the thing. These episodes, there's such a long stretch of just episodes that have nothing to do with the plot, and the plot is really interesting, and you kind of just want to get back to that. And it's fine to have all these other things going on, but weave it into the plot. Have them discovering things while, maybe Star was figuring out something and Jana happened to be there because Marco was preoccupied with something else. And so Jana and Star discover something. And now Jana already knows something about the world. It could have worked out that way. It's just weaving in character development with plot development. I don't think this show knows how to do that. That's a problem I had with the How to Train Your Dragon show that aired on Cartoon Network and then on Netflix, which I'm not caught up with at all at this point. I think there's like an entire season that I haven't seen yet, which is depressing because I used to be really into that. But yeah, I need to get back on that. But that was the problem I always had with that show, was that they didn't put plot development and character development together. So it's like one had to stop to do the other, and then the other one had to stop to do the other. And it was really weird because it felt like you were stopping and starting and then stopping and starting, and you just wanted to go together and develop at the same time. And that's why I feel like the filler in this show is so obvious and so blatant, and not only does the filler, it's so distant from the plot, but it doesn't even develop the characters in every episode, so it's just weird. It's weird. But getting back to the episode list, then we have Sleepover. Did I skip something? No, I didn't. Okay, we have Sleepover. Sleepover introduced the whole Starco and Jarko, I think is the name of Marco and Jackie, though I'm sure people ship Star and Jackie as well. People ship everybody in the show. But yeah, this episode was clearly a setup just to set up the eventual love triangle that's going to be happening. So in that respect, I can say it wasn't pointless, and it was kind of hype. I mean, like, I'm not a super Starco shipper as much as a lot of people are. I'm like I nod at them being together because I think that the first season really set up their friendship kind of masterfully, in my opinion. I made this really long post on Tumblr that I don't even know where it is anymore about how their relationship works really well and how it's setting up a good foundation. They have a good foundation that I don't feel like it's jumping the shark to put them together. At the same time, Marco and Jackie also have a similar kind of build up. It's not like as Star and Marco are in terms of like their friendship and their foundation is good. I think that in terms of building up, that Marco has to eventually deal with Jackie in a romantic situation was built up to nicely. I think it was built up to very, very well. I wasn't shocked when they went on a date in Bon Bon. I wasn't shocked. I was thoroughly impressed with how they handled it. So I'll get to that in a minute when I get to that episode. Gift of the Card. So we see the return to St. Olga's, which I feel like she's important, but they touch on her just barely, and then they get rid of her again. And again, I just wish they would deal more with their plot. They have so many plot threads at this point, and they take so many long, unnecessary breaks. I don't even know why they take so many unnecessary filler breaks when they have so much plot that they could be just developing. It's all like, are they just all saving it for season 3 or the second half of season 2? I don't know why they're taking such long breaks. Frenemies is a fun episode. It's super fun. I love Tom and Marco's dynamic. I wish there was more of them. I wish we got as much of them as we get Star and Jana. I wish Tom would show up more often and hang out with Marco because their whole dynamic is just hilarious. I almost kind of wish that they had a spin-off show or something because they're just so funny. This episode was hilarious. So this was fun. It was filler, but it was that good filler because it developed a new relationship that is funny and engaging. So I think that makes a good filler. Is mystery, and again we learned some stuff about the plot, which again Star and Marco are nowhere to be found to learn about it, so we still know more than our main characters do. Hungry Larry was pretty sure that was like a Halloween episode, wasn't it? Yeah, that kind of didn't develop anything. Neither did Spider with a Top Hat. While that was an interesting concept, I kind of don't even consider Spider with a Top Hat to be canon, only because I don't want it to be canon. I think it's fun idea, but I don't like the fact that everything lives in Star's wand. That's just weird in canon for me. It's fun by itself, but just in canon, I feel like that's really weird. Because that makes all of Star, whenever she fights, I feel like, ouch, these are like living people with lives and jobs and families that she's basically just using as weapons. That's a little unsettling. But, okay, so Into the Wand, very hype episode. A lot of plot development. Star was actually around for it, which was good. This is the kind of developmental episodes that I want, is where Star is figuring out stuff. Star knows what's going on, because she's our main character. So that was a good episode. Pizza thing, I'm going to be real honest, I don't like Ponyhead as a character. All of her episodes never really thrill me. And yeah, it didn't really do anything. It just... Ponyhead episodes always have to do with Marco for some reason. Her and Marco, like, talking. Well, not all of them, but a good majority of them, which is weird, because she's supposed to be Star's friend. So, then we have Page Turner. I'm trying to remember what happened in this episode. Yeah, again, we learn stuff about the world, but Glossaric is learning about it. Star is not there. I mean, we do learn a little bit. Star learns a tiny bit, but the major plot development in this world, Star was not present for. Marco was not present for. Marco was barely in this episode, but I mean, that's okay as long as Star knows it, because then we know that Marco will figure out through Star. She'll probably tell him off screen. So as long as Star knows something or Marco learns something, the other one will know. But she wasn't there for the big reveal of what's going on about magic leaving the world or something like that. The magic system being on the fritz, as the Wikipedia page says. Then we have Naysaya, which, in my opinion, is a good lead into Bon Bon, and it's a good sequel to the sleepover episode, which happened many episodes ago in this at this point. Like, I just, there's too many breaks in this season between plot points, and it just gets really confusing that I forget things. So we finally have Marco and Jackie. We finally have that development. I felt like that was really well handled. Again, I felt like that was well done. They're doing it justice. I know a lot of people who ship Starco are just fuming with anger. I am not fuming with anger. I am really excited to see what Jackie's character will do for Marco's character in terms of like developing him. And Bon Bon, I loved Marco's character in Bon Bon. I loved how he's maturing, and especially at the end of the episode when he's comforting Star, you can kind of see just the effects that getting a date has on a guy sometimes can really mature them. I've seen it in some of my guy friends from high school. You know, sometimes I just get more cocky, and other times they really do mature and they become more like nurturing. And I feel like that's what's happening with Marco. I like where his character is going. Bon Bon, as an episode, is very hype. I like it. I feel like the ending battle could have been a little more hype. And I keep saying hype like that's an actual like word that I'm using correctly, but you all know what I'm talking about. It didn't have as much punch in the ending battle as I feel like the season 1 finale did, but then that was a season finale that I'm comparing to a mid-season finale, so that's not really a fair comparison. But where Bon Bon shined was the character development and how it mixed with the plot. How the plot interrupted the character development. That's the best part about these type of episodes, is that real life is being interrupted by the plot. And the plot is just completely insane. But at the same time, the character can't even really deal with the plot because they're so emotionally hung up on the character development that's going on. And that's what I love. I love when they're competing for space. I love that tension that happens when the plot is coming, but the character development is happening, And you can't deal with both, but at the same time, you have to. And that you have to get over something. You either have to eliminate the plot, or you have to, the character has to eliminate whatever the plot is, usually some kind of threat or danger, or they have to put their character development aside, which usually builds up eventually to the fact that they're not dealing with whatever is bothering them, and that builds up. And it's just that tension. Tension is so important to just making a show, especially a show like this that's trying to be plot-centric. Tension is just, you need it in this type of show. And I feel like the fact that they have these long streams of just pointless filler that don't develop the characters, don't develop the plot, there's no point. You're just kind of having this weird slice of life. This is not a slice of life show, even though season 1 almost set it up to be a slice of life show. It's not. It's plot. It's a plot and character show. And I think it forgets that a lot. But it introduces these really great episodes where there's tons of plot going on, and then just forgets about it just to be a slice of life show again. And you kind of can't do that. You got to pick one. Now back to that theory that I mentioned a million years ago, before I forget to mention it, is that this season is twice as long as season 1. And I don't think that was because the creators wanted it to be that long. I don't think. I think that was just Disney saying, hey, we're going to give you twice as many episodes. Season 1 did really well, so we'll give you twice as much. Do something with it. And I feel like that season 2 might have been planned out initially to be as long as season 1, 13 episodes. And then you kind of have an extra amount of episodes. So what are you going to do with all that space? Well, we have a succinct, tightly written 13 episode season, so let's just add in some filler. Add in filler to fill in the holes. Which is really what filler is. You just fill in those strains of episodes where there's no plot going on. And it's too much, though. It's too much filler. I don't feel like they're spreading themselves too thin. I'm not sure if they don't have enough story to cover 3 seasons. In that case, just pull a Gravity Falls and end it early. I mean, I'm sure not everybody can do that because, Disney might say no. Of course, I'm sure Disney usually does say no. Gravity Falls was kind of a special case in how it ended. But, yeah, that's what it feels like to me, is that somewhere in here, there is a tightly written season, but it's just riddled with filler. There's too much, bacon and lettuce and all this other stuff in between the actual meat of the burger. And I don't know why I used the burger as an analogy, but whatever. You get the point. There's just too much filler. And I feel like if it was more of a tightly written season like season 1, if it just had less episodes, then we wouldn't have this problem, because they would have to get to the plot, and they wouldn't have as much time to have all these other episodes that really just do nothing. They do nothing. So it's kind of weird how the swell of this season has gone, because it started off really good for 2 episodes, and then it just dropped the ball. And then it kind of picked the ball back up at some points, but it just slipped right back out, and then at the end, it ended really strong in the mid-season. And again, I'm not as hyped for the second half of the season as I was for the beginning of season 2, simply because season 1, I felt like they had calmly yet effectively built up to this complete storm, and it's called Storm the Castle, which is aptly named. This complete cluster of plot that is just thrown at you. It's overwhelming, but it's overwhelming in a good way, because you can see all the pieces when you go back and watch as to how they were slowly building up to that, to this complete all-out brawl that happened in the season 1 finale. And I was like, oh, okay, so they're actually, that's how they're gonna write this plot. It's a slow burn, but it's still it's a slow burn, but it's never broken. It's never broken. It's always kind of this continuous hiss that's going on throughout the season. In season 2, it's choppy. It's absolutely choppy. It sprinkles plot, and then it just stops, and then it will sprinkle a little bit more, and then it'll stop. It's choppy, and I don't know why it has to be that way. Again, the only reason I can see why is because it's twice as long, and they didn't write a season for 22 episodes. They wrote a 13-episode season, and they had to stretch it out. And that's how it feels. It feels like it's stretched out. It feels like stuff was just added in after the fact, after the entire plot was figured out. And they just kind of added in filler episodes in between to just fill in that 22-episode gap that they were given. And I really hope the second half of season 2 just kind of goes just all out, and it's just plot. Because at that point, I feel like, how much more filler can you possibly have in this season? I really hope they got all of their filler out in this first half, because it was rough. And again, I'm not sure how thin the plot is between these 3 seasons that the creator has planned, but hopefully season 2 just, again, overwhelms me with plot. I'd rather be overwhelmed at this point than have that slow burn that season 1 had. Just give me all the plot you've got. Show me all of your plot. Bury yourself in plot and show me. I just want to get to the point, because all the pieces are set up at this point. They've been set up for a while. And I hope that they don't just play around and tease us more with this stupid filler that does nothing. It doesn't develop characters. It doesn't develop the plot. Why is it here? Stop doing that. You've done more than enough filler in this season. It's basically ruined the season, in my opinion, from being really great. And that might sound really harsh, but I feel like season 2 really, really dropped the ball in terms of being great, because of how much pointless filler there is. Not just filler, it's pointless filler. So, hopefully season 2, the second half, is non-stop plot. And again, I like all the characters. I mean, Jackie and Jana are good additions to the main roster. Tom hopefully comes back as more of a main character, because he's fun. Ludo is finally becoming a good villain. If I had to say one bad thing about season 1, it was that Ludo was he was your typical Saturday morning cartoon villain, and the show was too good for Ludo. So I'm glad that Ludo is now a threat, and he hasn't been a constant threat, because he's kind of more off on his own, learning how to handle his wand and everything like that. So he's more of a threat to us, because we know he's there, than Star, because Star was not aware of Ludo until much after we found out. We, the audience, found out, which again is a problem with this season, the fact that the main characters don't figure out stuff when the audience does, and we figure it out before. So we're just waiting for them to know. And that can be good if you're trying to build up some kind of tension. And the fact that, well, we know there's danger, but they don't know. And like every time, it's like that horror movie tension, that we know where the monster is, but they don't. But the show isn't building up that type of tension. It's just, for some reason, not showing the main character as the plot. And I feel like they're going to hold it off for this big reveal, and it's not going to be that much of a big reveal, because we already know. We, the audience, already know. So it's not going to be as big as if we didn't know and they didn't know. And then we all find out at the same time. And it's this big gas moment. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, like, it's not going to be that, because we already know. So, Bon Bon was a great episode. I'm not as hyped for the second half of season 2, simply because I can see that they don't know how to follow up a good episode with more good episodes, I suppose. So I'm cautiously hyped for the second half of season 2. It could go really great. It should go really great because clearly the writers are capable. Whenever they want to do a good episode, it's great. It's really great. They have it in them. They just need to stop all this filler. So, yeah, that's it.